Noah Harper stood in an oversized suit, trembling under the weight of the courtroom's gaze. Then, against all odds, he pulled out one document, one that could change everything. Silence. The judge leaned in. The powerful businessman went pale. "This proves he knew he was stealing our money," Noah declared. Gasps filled the room. Shock. And then, something no one saw coming. But let's start from the beginning. Noah could feel the weight of every eye in the courtroom, some filled with pity, others with amusement, but most with outright disbelief. A 13-year-old standing alone at the plaintiff's table, facing down a legal powerhouse? It was absurd. Across the room, Richard Langston sat with an air of detached confidence, his suit pristine, his posture relaxed. To him, this trial was nothing more than a formality, a minor inconvenience before his inevitable victory. Next to him, Edward Palmer, one of the most ruthless attorneys in the country, adjusted his tie, barely suppressing his smirk. Noah set his notes down, swallowing hard. The microphone in front of him felt too big, his suit too loose, the room too cold. But backing down wasn't an option. "Mr. Harper," Judge Reynolds said, his voice measured, "I want to be clear. This is not a school debate. The defense is led by experienced attorneys who know every inch of the law. If you proceed, you will be expected to follow legal procedures, argue within the framework of the court, and maintain decorum. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Noah replied, his voice steady, though his fingers tightened around the table's edge. Palmer exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. "Your Honor, let's not waste time. This boy has no legal background, no understanding of case law. No, the law is about fairness," Noah interrupted. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Palmer turned, his expression tightening. "Excuse me?" "The law is supposed to protect people," Noah continued, his voice growing stronger. "People like my mom, who trusted Richard Langston and lost everything. We don't have a fancy legal team and we don't have money, but we have evidence. And if justice is real, then I should have the right to present it." Palmer chuckled, shaking his head. "Admirable speech, but this is a court of law, not a playground. A child can't simply declare himself an attorney because he wants to." Judge Reynolds glanced at Noah, then at Palmer. "The law allows for pro se representation under exceptional circumstances. This is one such case. The plaintiff will proceed." Langston's jaw tensed. Palmer leaned over, whispering something in his ear, but Noah couldn't hear it. It didn't matter. The judge turned to Noah. "You may present your opening statement." Noah took a deep breath, stood straighter, and looked directly at the jury. "When my mom invested in Richard Langston's fund, she thought she was securing our future," he began. "She wasn't trying to get rich. She just wanted to protect what little we had." But Langston lied. He promised security while secretly funneling people's money into his own pockets. His voice was calm, his delivery measured. He sent emails reassuring investors that everything was fine, even after the money was already gone. People lost their life savings. Some lost their homes. We lost everything. Langston remained still, his expression unreadable. Noah exhaled, gripping the table. "Langston's lawyers will try to confuse you with technicalities. They'll say the contracts were complicated, that the risks were clear. But this isn't about fine print. This is about right and wrong. And by the end of this trial, I'll prove that Richard Langston knew exactly what he was doing, and that he doesn't deserve to walk away from this." Judge Reynolds nodded. "Defense, you may proceed." Palmer stood, buttoning his suit jacket. His movements were slow, deliberate, calculated. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, his voice smooth, "what we have here is a tragedy. No doubt. A boy standing here, desperate to find someone to blame for his misfortunes." Noah clenched his jaw. "But tragedy is not fraud," Palmer continued. "Investments come with risks, and sometimes people lose money. It's unfortunate, but it's not illegal." He gestured toward Noah. "This young man is emotionally invested, but emotion is not evidence. And what he fails to realize is that there is no proof, none, that Mr. Langston knowingly committed fraud." Noah's fingers curled into a fist under the table. Palmer's smirk returned. "This will be quick," he said, sitting down. Noah had never wanted to prove someone wrong so badly in his life. The prosecution's first witness was supposed to be a former Langston employee, someone who had sent Noah an anonymous tip about internal fraud. But when Judge Reynolds called their name, there was no answer. Palmer leaned back in his chair, feigning surprise. "We were informed Mr. Calloway was prepared to testify," Judge Reynolds said, frowning. Palmer shrugged. "Perhaps he reconsidered." Noah's stomach twisted. Had they gotten to him? His mother reached out, squeezing his arm. "Stay focused," she whispered. Noah looked at the stack of evidence in front of him. He still had documents, bank records, emails, but without a key witness, Langston's team would poke holes in every claim. Palmer met his gaze, that smug expression still in place. He thought Noah would crumble. But he wouldn't. Noah turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to proceed with evidence review." Judge Reynolds nodded. "Very well." Noah swallowed hard. It wasn't the start he wanted, but he wasn't done yet. And neither was Langston. The courtroom was no longer amused. No one was laughing now. This wasn't just some kid's desperate attempt to be heard. This was a fight. And it was just getting started. Noah stood at the plaintiff's table, gripping the edges to steady himself. His palms were sweaty, his throat dry. The weight of the courtroom pressed down on him, the gaze of seasoned legal professionals drilling into his every hesitation. This wasn't a school debate. Every stumble, every misplaced word was another crack in his credibility. And he was cracking. His opening arguments had been shaky, his cross-examinations disjointed. Palmer and his team shredded his questions with technicalities, drowning him in terminology designed to keep outsiders, especially a 13-year-old, out of the game. Every objection he made was overruled. Every point he tried to raise was countered with icy precision. It was painful to watch. Lauren Harper clenched her fists in her lap. Every instinct in her body screamed for her to pull Noah out, to tell him it was okay, that he didn't have to do this. But she stayed silent. Because, beneath the nerves, beneath the uncertainty, she saw something stronger. His resolve. And she wasn't the only one. The chuckles that had filled the courtroom earlier, the smug whispers, the sideways glances, had faded. No one was laughing anymore. At first, people had expected a spectacle. A child lawyer? It had to be a joke. They had come for the novelty, for the absurdity of it all. But now they were watching something different. A fight. Noah adjusted his notes. He was losing ground fast, and he knew it. But he also knew something else. He had been watching. Every time Palmer spoke, every time a witness answered, every time Langston so much as shifted in his seat, Noah was taking it all in. The confidence, the phrasing, the rhythm of the way they spoke. It was a script, a routine designed to manipulate perception, to twist facts just enough to sound believable. They thought he wouldn't notice. They were wrong. Palmer moved on to a routine rebuttal, voice smooth, calculated. Mr. Harper has presented a compelling emotional argument, but emotions don't change facts. As we have already established, his mother received multiple reassurances that her investment was safe. Noah's fingers tightened around a piece of paper. He had been waiting for this. "You said earlier," Noah interjected, his voice steady, "now, that my mother received an email confirming her investment was secure." Palmer barely spared him a glance. "That's correct." Noah lifted a document from his table and stepped forward, holding it up for the jury to see. "But here, in this report, Mr. Langston himself admitted the funds were already missing before that email was sent." The shift in the room was instant. The jury leaned forward. The judge's brow furrowed. Even Langston, who had remained eerily composed throughout the trial, shifted uncomfortably. Palmer hesitated. It was only for a second, a fraction of a pause, but it was there. Noah caught it. So did everyone else. Palmer cleared his throat. "That's a misunderstanding." Noah didn't blink. "Or a lie." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. For the first time, Palmer didn't have an immediate response. Judge Reynolds turned his sharp gaze on him. "Counselor?" Palmer exhaled slowly, adjusting his tie. "There may have been discrepancies in the timing of certain communications. That does not indicate fraud." Noah's eyes narrowed. "It indicates deception." The tension in the courtroom thickened. Palmer opened his mouth, then closed it. A murmur ran through the crowd. Reporters scribbled furiously. Langston shifted again, this time adjusting his cuffs with precise, careful movements. He was uncomfortable. Noah had just done what no one else had managed to do. He had made them sweat. The room had changed. A boy had walked in that morning. A kid playing lawyer. A punchline to a courtroom drama. But now they saw something else. Not a novelty. Not a lost cause. A threat. Palmer forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Harper, I understand you're upset, but legal matters are rarely as simple as—" "I'm not upset," Noah interrupted, his voice clear, certain. "I'm asking a question. One that you haven't answered." Palmer pressed his lips together. Noah let the silence stretch. Seconds passed. The longer it went, the more obvious it became. Palmer didn't have a good answer. And that was the moment everything changed. The audience wasn't laughing anymore. They were rooting for him. Noah stood taller now. His hands no longer trembled when he spoke. His voice, once shaky and uncertain, was clear, steady, controlled. The doubt that had once filled the room was gone. At first, Palmer had dismissed him as a nuisance, a child playing dress-up in a courtroom where he didn't belong. But now the smirk was gone. The relaxed confidence had hardened into something else. Annoyance, maybe even concern. Noah wasn't just keeping up. He was winning. His questions were precise. He didn't waste words. Every time Palmer tried to spin an answer into something vague or misleading, Noah pulled him right back. "You claim my mother had access to all financial disclosures," Noah said, flipping through his notes. "Yet you also testified that the documents were only available upon request. Did my mother request them?" Palmer exhaled slowly. She, like every investor, was welcome to do so. But did she? Palmer adjusted his tie. No. Noah looked at the jury. "So you're saying my mother should have requested information she didn't even know existed?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Palmer's jaw tightened. Noah pressed on. Is it fair to expect someone to ask for evidence of fraud before they even suspect fraud is happening? Palmer shifted. That's not what I said. Noah tilted his head. No, but it's what you meant. The tension in the courtroom thickened. The jury was listening now, not just to Palmer's words, but to what he wasn't saying. Noah was no longer defending his case. He was dismantling theirs. The more Noah dug, the more he found. Palmer had been careful, but careful wasn't perfect. There were cracks in Langston's defenses, small at first, but growing wider with every question, every inconsistency. And then came the moment that changed everything. The night before, Noah had stayed up, poring over the thousands of pages of financial records Langston's team had buried in legal paperwork. He was exhausted, eyes burning from lack of sleep, but he knew he had to find something. Then, buried deep in a folder labeled Miscellaneous Correspondence, he found it. A single document. An internal memo, signed by Richard Langston himself. And what it revealed was devastating. The memo wasn't just proof of wrongdoing. It was proof that Langston had known for months that the company was bankrupt, that he had continued accepting investments anyway, that he had lied to his investors, knowing full well that their money was already gone. It was fraud in its purest form, and it had his signature on it. Noah didn't hesitate. He grabbed the document and stood. He walked past Palmer, past Langston, straight to the evidence table. The room went silent. This, Noah said, holding up the memo, proves that Mr. Langston knew exactly what he was doing. He lied. Langston's jaw tightened. He stole. Palmer rose quickly. Objection! He destroyed lives. The courtroom erupted. The reporters at the back of the room scrambled to get a better shot. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail of the document. Langston's face had gone pale. Palmer was already moving, flipping through his own stack of papers, searching for a way to counter the evidence. But it was too late. Because in that moment, everyone in the room, judge, jury, spectators, saw the truth. The boy had done what no one else had managed to do. He had cornered Richard Langston, and there was no way out. The courtroom held its breath. Noah sat still, hands clasped tightly together, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Across the room, Langston shifted in his seat, his usual confidence gone. He stared at the jury, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. Palmer, who had spent the entire trial with smug assurance, was now expressionless, his jaw tight. The jury foreman stood. The entire room seemed to shrink around him. We, the jury, find the defendant. A pause, a breath. Guilty on all counts. Silence. Then the room erupted. Gasps, cheers, reporters rushing to their phones, typing furiously. Someone in the back clapped before remembering where they were. Noah Harper covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Langston didn't move. His face was frozen in disbelief, his world crumbling in real time. His empire, built on deception, was gone. His future, one he had controlled so carefully, was no longer his to dictate. Noah let out a slow breath, his shoulders finally relaxing. Months of fear, exhaustion, doubt, it all lifted at once. His mother pulled him into a hug, holding on as if letting go would make it all disappear. "You did it," she whispered, voice shaking. "You really did it." Judge Reynolds tapped his gavel, silencing the noise just enough to speak. He looked at Noah with something rare. Pride. In 30 years, I've seen a lot in this courtroom, he said, his voice firm, but I've never seen anything like this. Outside, chaos. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashed. Noah, how did you do it? Will you be a lawyer someday? Noah just smiled. I just wanted to do what was right. And the boy who had walked into the courtroom as a joke walked out as something else, a hero.